Hi there, Randi Green here, and the podcast. I have brought Josh with me today.
Hello.
And how are you doing today, Josh?
I'm good.
That's good. Yes. Just so people kind of get this, we are in Denmark on the island. It's a foggy day. The energies are not particularly high. So the question is, why even do a podcast on a day like this? To do a podcast on a day like this is because I woke up with some interesting ideas in my head. And I know Josh woke up with some interesting ideas as well and had a little bit of synchronicity with birds and whatnot, but we'll just leave it there. There are definitely changes in our reality. I feel that. I assume you are feeling that too. There are new incoming groups. I'm going to talk about that because there are sometimes better just to stay silent until we know if they're staying or if they're just traversing, and there's no need to put a lot of things in motion if it's just someone who's sojourning, moving through and then moving beyond, and then something else will happen. And that's the extraterrestrial, the extra dimensional part of our reality that some have access to and others do not. They just trot along in the world as they know of it. On the main timeline, the past, present, and future is still operating as people know of within the more traditional settings. But some of us are moving into subsidiary timelines, and I'm using it in plural. I call it in my course material the subsidiary timeline, but that's because that's the path of liberation that I'm acquainted with that leads to the processes that, if done correctly, should lead to the leaving of the enclosure. These have been part of many teachings over time. We have recollections of it in Buddhism, we have recollection of it in Christianity, and we have recollection of it in Hinduism and other places of the older types of material and or text or religions or however you want to call it. But the deep secrets about this has always been kept within few communities that have had the full knowledge, or divided amongst them the full knowledge, because this is actually tied to the different lineages and the original reseeding after the fall of Atlantis. That ties into what I want to talk about today. There should be no secret that the reason why I'm bringing this up in this manner, because it is similar to what I teach in the whole academy, but it is dissimilar and it's kind of within another framework. And people should not get confused and think, oh, this is another teaching or this is a new teaching. No, it's just another angle of the same teaching. But the teachings I have in the whole academy is associated with the past cycles, how to get out of the past cycles, how to elevate and complete and nullify and annihilate all ties to the past universal cycles, because our entire system is in its completion cycle, and that means it's elevating, and those who can will elevate with it. Those who can't will be pushed into other universes that fits their structure. And I will here recommend another angle on the same idea from Alex Collier at the ranch, where he holds a 3.5-hour talk. And I recommend you listen through all of it and not on fast speed or anything. Literally just take your time and absorb the material. And he talks about how when universes elevates, and he got that from his friends from the Andromeda system. I don't know if it's a galaxy or it's a constellation. I was always a little bit confused about that, but we'll just leave it at that. And they told him that when a system completes, then there are the ones that moves on and there are the ones that are being pushed into a new pocket reality. And that's been told about in many different religions and esoteric systems as well. Later in Christianity with heaven and hell, those who go to heaven, those who go to hell, and all of these distortions that have come from it. Now, then you will ask, well, is it here where you're going to talk about how it actually is? No, I've given my best to explain the subsidiary timeline I know of, the path of liberation in course material, and it's not particularly expensive. So if you want to know that, that's where you go and get it. So what is it that I want to talk about today? First and foremost, I have primed you here to understand that I am not going against my previous teachings. I'm not going against what I have said, but everything is a process. So everything I said up until now, as part of the whole Future Humanities YouTube channel, as part of the whole Academy YouTube channel, as part of the High Awareness YouTube channel, as part of all of the free material, is the last steps of the old trajectory, the main timeline that those of us who are moving beyond whatever that is, because people who are moving into other realities now, and they're talking about that too, and they're also coming forth with on their path of how to leave this system, whatever that means. They are proposing different dynamics, different energy exercises, how they live their lives, and it's kind of a full-blown holistic approach to your life. Once you get on the subsidiary timeline and begin the journey out of this enclosure, it's your entire life that needs to adjust to it. And that's a thing we see in all teachings, whether it's Buddhism that do the monastery, or you do the Kala Chakra, or you do the Hinduism, whatever you do, this kind of segregation, as in saying, I'm doing whatever I need to do now because I'm completing as well. I know this is, if I work well, this will be the last time I'm here. And when I say work, I mean energy work, I mean inner work, I mean contemplation, I mean the right choices, I mean dealing with karma, my version of that is in the transition sciences, that is to release everything that connects us to past lives and past timelines, whether they're orchestrated or natural. So that's, for me, that's what karma is. So in that manner, I have made the entire system to teach people how they can, if they follow that teaching, find their way. Not that it's a success just because you do the teachings. There are no guarantees in any teaching. Everybody knows that. But we do our best, and eventually we should develop a method within ourselves that comes from within, so we know this is the way I do it, this is the way that it works for me. There are certain things that goes with, and I'm here going to recognize completely that when I talk about the path of liberation, I step pretty heavily back into my past life as I were as part of that Tibetan Buddhist monastery. And I'm not even sure it was Buddhist in the understanding we know of it. I know it was not Theravada. I think it was more like the Thunderbolt path, or more similar to what is mirrored in Kala Chakra. So in that way, please bear with me. Those of you who are heavy into Theravada, you might not recognize this. You will see there are snippets of it, and then there are snippets that doesn't add up. But that's the different systems, and we recognize the different systems. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. There are definitely some that have a high degree of distortion, which we should avoid to the best of our abilities. The ones that promises the fast track to get out, or you just do this exercise and then you get out. And we've seen plenty of that where people have been lured into doing specific practices. And within 5 years, nothing has happened other than they are just becoming a shadow version of themselves due to influences, because that teaching system was not leading them out of here in the manner they wanted to, but actually leading them somewhere else. And again, that's the claim that I have. People must experience these things for themselves, because not everything is daisies and lilies in this reality. And when I even use that, I know I get into trouble, because lilies is part of some specific brotherhoods and daisies is another brotherhood. So we get into trouble here. So not everything is roses and cakes. Oh, yeah, I get into trouble here with the symbols as well. So point being, there are challenges on the path, which we all know. So my question I woke up with this morning, not question, actually insights, because dream time, not going there either, but it's not dream time for me. There is so much going on. But the thing that I wanted to work with today that arose was this, that, which we know from the ancient teachings, that's why I bring them to the table, that reality is a mirror of awareness. And that means that the first step, we can go into that in the traditional Buddhist analogies and understandings of perception and how that works. I'm not going there because I don't fully align with these teachings. They are, even though Theravada is a very complex system, most of it, it doesn't catch me. I have no visuals to it. It's very mental, so I don't really know what to do with that system. But I can say that the way I want to work with it is the way I perceive it. So these are my understandings and my experiences and how I see it. And it's not what people are used to mostly. What I want you to bear in mind is that what most people have, in my opinion, are remnants of original teachings. And we have lost access to the true teachings. Am I then giving the true teachings? No, of course not. I'm giving my version of the teachings as I recall them. And everybody's doing that. And that's where we get distortion. Some are recalling it better than others. And I'm not saying that I am recalling it to a large degree, or I have the full scale of it, or whatnot. The litmus test for me when we talk about what we recall is the coherence in the teachings, how much they add up and how much we can recognize them in our reality. Again, here, that we can't really trust either, because if it fits a program, then it just fits the program. It doesn't fit the true path out. So we need to be very observant of what we're actually dealing with here. Let me give a little bit of background. And this is again where we touch human history, as in what is human history and what's the truth, what is not. I just want to say here, as I've said many other places, that we had some pretty big cataclysmic events 65,000 years ago, where the fifth dimension completely was lost. We had the blow up of the fifth planet in our system, and we lost access to the fifth cycle inside this reality. That was tied to the complete deconstruction of what we understand as the Atlantean colony. And some of the groups that there were specific humanoid races that had got access to our reality field that is, in my opinion, not what we associate with human, hence my word humanoid, meaning they come from parallel systems, other constellations that hold humanoid genetics. What are humanoid genetics? Insectoid, avian, reptoid, and mammal. And for those of you who say, what is mammal? Well, there has been a lot on the internet at some point of the lion beings from Vega, for instance, that's mammal. We have depictions of that both in Egyptian mythology as well as Babylonian mythology, half man, half animal, half man, half bird. And then there are the ones that are more bird-like, and then there are the ones that are more reptile-like, but we have different versions of this as we have seen. And of course, science tells us that these are just depictions of gods that are showing their powers and attributes, and that's why they got bird's heads or crocodile head or scarab head or whatever it is in Egyptian culture. But the matter of the fact is they are trying to tell us what kind of humanoid being we're dealing with. For instance, the one with scarab head, just to put that one, would that, I can't remember what the name is, you can look all of that up, of the Egyptian gods. Would it then be that he would walk around with the head of a beetle? No, of course not. But it would show that this was a humanoid being. And if you were to see that humanoid being in real life, you would see a man that looked like a man, but would most likely have from the torso and up, the head would be dissimilar. You would be instinctively knowing that this was not a human as you know. And we can then ask, why didn't the Egyptians then depict the gods in that humanoid form? And that's a really good question. So the question is, did they get it delivered, or was it faint memory, or was something they saw on the astral plane, and all of these things. So we don't really know this, but what I can say when I look at the depiction of the quote-unquote god with the man body and the scarab head, I see a different entity, a humanoid behind, that I recognize and understand comes from a specific system that perhaps were part of a constellation that they depicted as a scarab, and then because of that made a man with a scarab head because it looked, or a beetle head because that came from a constellation they associated with the beetle, and they associated with some of the beetles that they saw around themselves that are doing certain things. For instance, some of the beetles that are the dung beetles that are gathering, rolling things up, and we know that's part of Egyptian mythology. So the interpretation that science have given us is not necessarily accurate. That's their interpretation. This is mine interpretation. If we go with the idea that awareness forms reality, and that's where I want to go. So I went out on a tangent with the Atlantean cataclysmic event that took away that colony. And at that time, we had my version of Atlantis in the fifth dimension. It has nothing to do with physical Atlantis, like we see mirrored in Plato's Tiamat or Tiamos or whatever it's called. I'm sorry, people, I'm not good at remembering all of these human stuff and human names and human whatever. Look it up, Plato and his analogy on Atlantis, and most of you have most likely heard it already. For me, he was just referring to the very advanced civilizations in Santorini, Crete, these areas out there, The island that is now become Santorini used to be a very advanced piece of architecture and civilization that used to exist that had advanced technology, but that's not Atlantis. It was positioned in the Atlantean Ocean, but it's not Atlantis. But he put it that way to show that this city lived in the ocean of Atlantis, and hence it comes from the Atlantic Ocean, called Atlanteans. That's the way that you use the word. So we need to understand how they were using the words. It's not the same as it was Atlantis as we know. Can we then say the fifth dimensional colony was called Atlantis? And that's a really good question. I'm not sure I can answer that, other than that might also have been positioned in the Atlantean Ocean, or perhaps is now below the Atlantean Ocean, which is not, because it was fifth dimensional. So there are loose ends. You see, when we tap into our recall of ancient history, we collide with what we know in our current life and our type of reality, and what we have studied and what we have seen. And our brain tries to grasp what we see as visions in our head, aligning it with the information that we have, and then distortions arise from that. So that's one part of understanding how awareness tailors reality, our reality perception, that we have a lot of ideas in our head that tailors reality perception. So going back to that fifth cycle colony, which I would prefer to call it, that was part of the fifth dimension. And the reason why I have no issue with calling it Atlantis is actually due to the blue color that's associated with it, the blue flame technology that's associated with it, and the humanoids and their regenesis programs. And that's how I see that Atlantis, and nothing to do with the advanced civilizations that were the remnants of the previous advanced civilizations we have had on our planet, of which the Minoan, the Cretan, and the on the island that's now become Santorini. What's it called? What was the original name of it? The green island out there before the volcanic eruption out there.
Vesuvius? Not Vesuvius? No, I don't.
No. That's another place.
There's so many different places
yes.
and islands there. So.
Santorini, look it up. It was called something before it had this huge cataclysmic. The huge cataclysmic effect of the volcanic eruption that left behind what we now know as Santorini. It was called something else. And in my memory, because I have memory of being there, we called it the Green Island. So you see, my language here is different. I have my own interpretation that were similar to the time period where we didn't have these names as we have today. So that's part of when we talk about human history. That makes it difficult too, because those of us who remember it, we called it something different than we are calling it today. So that's another way of cloaking history and make it difficult for us to align with it. When we come to the general perception of Atlantis tied to these ancient civilizations and walking down the route of Plato and some of the esoterics of the Blavatsky group within Theosophy and others that were talking about Atlantis, you can find plenty of that out on YouTube. There's so many that are going down that and explaining that in all ways and forms, where you can get the nitty-gritty details of what that is or isn't, and what they think it is or is not, and how they're finding it, and what they think is Atlantis and not. Point being is, as Graham Hancock also is pointing out, 12,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago, and prior to that, we had some very advanced civilizations on our planet, and the only reason why it's the big mystery is because the scientists and the archaeologists of the 18th and 19th and 20th century, not 20, but more or less 20th century, they decided that we were more primitive and grow into a more advanced state, and we are the peak of all civilizations, when the matter of the fact is that's not the case. And if we can just turn that around, then there are no big mystery. Then there is a full open path to investigate, wow, we have had the rise and fall of advanced civilizations. Why not so far back? And when we also say these advanced civilizations, they left things behind, because those of us who are within the alternative history, we are agreeing pretty much that around 12,500 years ago, there was a cataclysmic war where we lost access to the fourth dimension. And with that, the ability to deconstruct solid matter into forms of whatever we wanted to construct it into. So that comes with consciousness as well. So to be able to fully navigate how awareness and consciousness can impact reality, fourth dimension, fifth dimension are a must for that to happen. In the fifth dimension, you create the blueprint, the holographic energetic architecture. In the fourth dimension, you gather the different types of matter or organic material. And with that, you can begin to work with reality in a completely different way, sculpture it, mold it, transform it, or do whatever you want to modify it, do whatever you want to do with it. And that's one of the reasons why when we talk about the pull-ins and where people have been brought on board crafts or in sub-oceanic facilities or whatever it is, they are brought to facilities that they might see be under the in the ocean or under the ocean or deep down in the ocean. They are actually in the fourth dimension because the ocean can still hold the configuration of fourth dimension. Everything is fluid, so that's a key point about the fourth dimension. On board a craft, that's in another dimension. That is a pocket reality inside ours, but it operates in the fourth dimension, and hence they can pop in and out of our realities, shifting between our reality, the enclosure, and into the fourth dimension from where they can take off, because we have adjacent artificial fourth dimensional realities connected to our reality. So that's important to recognize. That's part of how the extraterrestrials do it. The fifth dimension, unfortunately, is damaged. Most of what's left there are the remnants of the deconstruction of the Atlantic colonies, of the humanoids, and many of them have lost their ability to have form, and that's why we have most of the group called the Dark Ones. But we also have remnants of these shadow beings in the third cycle energies that are associated with deep space and parts where the viability rate of the units are low. So with that understanding, when I say that awareness tailors or forms the formation of realities due to awareness, then there are all of these distortions, destructions, deconstructions, annihilation dynamics, chaos dynamics, and things that are not working well. And that's where, when we talk about Buddhism and the Buddhist teachings from Siddhartha, was that the reality is out of whack. It's no longer in balance. It's no longer working as it's supposed to. It's no longer granting us these abilities that we once had. So our path of liberation, our path out of the enclosure, that is an artificially constructed reality that is kept stable by technology, that goes into the original Pleiadian scientists that partook in creating the foundation of the enclosure, where it back then was part of a regenesis program for true humans, which are not humanoids. That means we have human genetics. That was created to ensure what called a closed environment where we could heal and regenerate our original genetics due to the timeline event, which science calls Big Bang. So this is the background when we're talking about this. That was later hijacked 12,500 years ago and taken over by the humanoids. And hence, my claim is that we are already colonized, and that's why the groups that are coming in now are not invading us, because we have already been invaded, so there's nothing to invade. But there's a constant going and coming of these extraterrestrial groups that are negotiating over the terms of what they can and cannot do inside the enclosure. And it's getting less and less ordered, because the councils that used to be here until 2016 under the Draco system is no longer here. So now it's just the Wild West. And those of us who are aware of this, we recognize the Wild West. And that's why I say to the beginning, why there's not much point in going in and saying this group is coming, this group is going, this is happening, this is not, because it's changing almost month by month, or sometimes within the same month several times. So it's just a recognition that if it was out of whack before, it's even more out of whack now. And that leads to more chaos, that leads to more deconstruction, that leads to more entropy on the main timeline. That's my opinion. That's why I choose to go on the subsidiary and just leave behind the world as it is and continue my journey as part of this system and do the last pieces I need to do. Whether or not I can get out, I don't know, but I definitely will try to do it. So with that introduction here, we kind of know where we are.
No, it's a good background. Well, repeat what the awareness, the thing you said about awareness.
Well, there are different ways. Of course, I woke up with this sentence in my head. But
again, what is that sentence again?
It is that awareness tailors reality. It's a very short one. It's not a long, elaborated one. But the meaning, the understanding that what I woke up with specifically was step 1, awareness tailors reality. Step 2, reality is Pleiadian engineering. These are, and I know that. So it's not something I don't know. Yeah.
But these are huge terms. I don't know how any bigger terms you can get other than awareness and reality.
Yeah.
So those are huge terms,
Yeah.
you know, and different people have different understandings or definitions of those. And where we're at in realizing what those terms are, how they relate, I mean, it's huge. So
what do you think?
Well, I think we should define those terms to begin with.
Okay, how do you define awareness?
Yeah. When I think of awareness, you know, these interrelate to terms like consciousness. In certain teachings, I know you have different understanding of what consciousness, things like attention and mindfulness, you know. So these are all similar terms, but I think they're quite there's a distinct difference in some of these. If we don't get the terms right, then if we're not on equal terms of understanding, then it's kind of hard to have a meaning. And then, of course, Randi comes from this as a very expanded perspective.
Yeah,
you know?
I can talk about
very
that later.
expanded. So,
yes, but what do you think?
Oh, so what I think is less than actually getting to the skill level where Randi is to be able to see and know this for ourselves. So this is a starting point. Randi says this is information that I ultimately have to go and see and know myself. Yeah. You know, it's like an expanded version of our little reality here, base program of politicians and factions vying for control and power, and they create things. But this is just scaled up, right? And this is fundamentally, from what I gather, the way you're approaching this is based on beingness, or certain beings doing certain things, realities or realms, things like this. And it centers around this way, like a huge cosmic drama, right? And where it unfolds, how it unfolds. And its very core essence is this beings, you know, human beings. Mentioned this thing, which can't totally recall that one. I know the alligator one and the bird head ones and things like this. And, you know, even though some people might say, oh, they were doing chimeric experiments, so I have no idea.
There was part of that. There was 10,000 years where the Dracos actually had that going for them here. And that group is definitely part of some of the distortions of the humanoid genetics that were part of the fourth cycle that was not particularly leading to anything good. It just led to more chaos and more distortion. But when I look into, I've got some very vivid memories of that. But when I look into that, I also think there's an overlay, because it's sometimes when we tap into these quote unquote memories as part of our planetary history, there are overlays. What do I mean with that? I mean that first and foremost, again, this is where where suddenly we route into the extraterrestrial group but it plays into some degree. In all of this, first and foremost, people, to understand reality, whatever you think reality is, it most likely isn't. So step one is reality is a reflection of how we perceive it.
Well, yeah, right, because we know that a cat sees something different than us. We only have a limited, narrow vision, our physical vision, right? But we know that there's great more to see that we can't see. And so, yeah, when we talk about things like reality, I immediately think our sense bases, internal and external, right? Objects of this, and then when those two meet, the consciousness associated with all the six senses, the sixth sense being mind, then we've got things like, okay, well, we have consciousness. I won't define that now, or what some people it is and some. Then you've got thought forms, right? Then you have perception, how things are being perceived, which is kind of a recognition, trying to compare something to others. You know, form, you have light and color. So there's just so much to consider, right? And then feeling. So then I don't want to get so overwhelmed here. So these are just a few of the little dynamics in reality. And I think one of the things that can help get on Randi's level is this development of, first off, you got to be interested in it. If you're not interested in it, then you'll never get anywhere close to this. So having a desire to look into to whether it be because you have to, even if you don't want to, or you see a benefit in something like this. So this healthy, wholesome desire, and then why are you doing that? Hopefully it will lead towards. and not away from it, right? And then you have to have energy, and Randi's energy is just so amazing.
No need to talk about me.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, these are qualities that need to be developed to get on this level. And then we have the heart, right? The heart mind, and the emotions, what will get transformed into like the vibrational field. And so that's a huge element into this too, right? If that's not there. And then of course the investigation, like Randi, she can just bam, I see into this, I see into that, I can see this, and this is linked to this. So this investigating, you know, without that, then so those are qualities that need to be there in order to penetrate all these different things in reality. The last thing I'll say is, you know, is there an ultimate reality? Is there an ultimate form? Okay, so the only way one way ways we can do it is drill down into the minutest particles and see them rising and ceasing. And I'm not there yet. These are claims that some practitioners have, that they can see the ceaseless arising of these the smallest unit of matter, basically, that is ceaselessly arising, and they have certain characteristics. But what about on a macro scale? Randi's blowing it out, you know, even into vast cycles, but even beyond those, even beyond Randi's limits, finding, or any other yogi or people that can see into these times of these vast cycles of time, they're really, from what I gather, there is no discernible beginning or end. So all that from the macro to the micro, and then the mind's version of it too, or a nama, or with this name, because whatever these things, whatever all this form has, it has a name associated with it, right? A name or a mentality. So the mind's involvement in this, and then we have the formless too. So it's just it's not an easy coffee break time to just figure all this out.
This is where I need to do clean table.
Yeah.
Because what you're exemplifying
and
here, what you're
Yeah.
exemplifying here. Thank you, George. This is a good example. Whether it's science or it's the Theravada teachings, which you refer to when you refer to these kind of things, or Mahayana, or whatever it is. When we begin to look at reality through the lenses of a teaching system, we miss reality altogether. Because then we begin to perceive reality within a specific system. And that system has developed specific types of perception of reality over time, thought forms.
Well, that's what I did mention, perception. Yeah. So that's one of many elements of this. So So from what you described, I would say a lot of that is perception of forms, right? Yeah. So, like, I guess, throw it back here. What is reality?
Yeah. But when we go with awareness, Tailors reality, then you just show the perfect example of it. That's one of the reasons why I'm not gung-ho on the Theravada teachings, is because it has become so complex and elaborate that it has become a massive distortion in itself. It blocks the access to the true interpretation of reality.
Well, what is reality?
No, let's just go in and say, if we go with the Theravada, it's isness. And interestingly enough, Alice Collier talked about isness as well. So what is the isness? You can't explain it, you can't describe it, it's just there.
Some people call it suchness, but yeah, I just want to say, I don't think no one has any kind of monopoly on reality.
No, I'm just,
so, you know what I mean?
Yes, no need to. So in that, when you say suchness, I will say then it clicks, it triggers an understanding I have. You have suchness as the otherness, and then you have the isness as the foundation. So the isness and the suchness is not the same. And this is where people get caught up in argumentation and discussions about the different verbs and words. And that's why I'm teaching systems. And this is part of the understanding of awareness, Tailors reality. So if we see reality as a huge blanket of energy units that are just waiting for our active participation. And the Buddha talks about that too, that there are realms that comes to life once one begins to think about that realm exists, then they get transferred into that one at time of death, or when they transfer, if they have worked their entire life on that idea of that realm, then literally when they reincarnate or reformate into that realm that they have thought existed. And that's super, super important. So when we talk about cycles of energy, we're talking about huge, dynamic, tailored on just raw reality fields of energy units. Whatever these energy units are called, the Hindus call pratiki and whatever that you're referring to, which were caught up. No, they picked up on these words. So the pratiki, the whatever they were called, they used a lot of Hindu terminology, similar like Madame Blavatsky incorporated a lot of Hindu terminology, which is just making it more complex. And Alistair Bailey, a lot of Hindu terminology that is not useful.
Sure, this is a good distinction because there's certain teachings and understandings that are helpful on certain times and levels, right? And then there are vast, profound levels that, that's what they are. But are they going to be that relevant in life? Probably not. Maybe not. I don't know. So that it's a good to know. Yeah. So I'm not saying drawing value judgments. The super complex, detailed is good or bad. The super simplistic, good or bad. They're different. There's pros and cons to each way. I will say, I think to sum it up quite easily is that which is subject to arise is subject to cease. That which is subject to be compounded or brought together is apart.
Of course, entropy.
Yes.
So what my angle on this one is, and again, it goes in with some of the understandings I have of why I'm here and what I'm doing here and why I quote-unquote chose, not because I actually wanted to, but since circumstances had come to such a degree that to the past life I had at that Buddhist monk and my demise, I resolved to the fact, okay, I can now see when I was up there, when I died, in the death process, I could see that I was, because of what had happened to me, which I talk about other places, but it don't need to go into details here. But what had happened to me, I could see in my death moment that I would be sucked back in. So I made a resolve when I got sucked back in, because it's due to laws, energetic, genetic affinity. It's not about will, it's about when your holographic energetic architecture, your energy systems gets aligned in a specific way, they will be drawn to similar reality field pockets that are similar to the configuration you have. And that's a law. And that's part of these cycles. So that's reality. Reality is composed of energy that has dynamics, that works in specific ways. And science tells us the same thing. They're just seeing it on the electromagnetic spectrum. But on the great scale of things, the universal structures are based upon laws of reality. And that's part of the isness. It works like that. That is how it is, and it's not about what you want it to be.
Yeah, it's exactly, because we would need to see reality for how it is, not how we want it to be, and that also the famous saying, whatever you think it is, the truth is always, which is another important thing.
And that makes a distinctive difference between the way I operate and most people operate. Most people operate because they want a next life. Whether they know of it or not, they are afraid of not having a next life. So whatever they're doing is for my next life, or it's going to heaven, or whatever the distortions are. It's not this, I'm living to cease to exist entirely. Nobody lives like that.
See, we come around to this again and again and again. Yeah. This is based on existence, you know. This is based on the of will I exist, won't I exist? Yeah. Will I both exist and not exist, or will I neither exist and... And I'm saying, okay, let's blow the doors off of all that and say, what if that didn't even... And I can't really every time I consider that.
Yes. So when I was in that death moment and I resolved to, now I can see I will be sucked back in, because that's the law. So it's not about my volition, my free will, and what I choose or not choose. It is what I have become that will drive me to that pocket reality where I belong. Super important.
And how did you get where how did you become what you become? And that's based on our choices and actions.
No, that's the practice. Again, and it's good that you're saying this way, and people might feel, are they in a big discussion? What's going on? No. This is again where because it's so natural to me, I'm not even thinking about the distinction with what most people go through. For me, it's completely natural that this life is whatever I'm doing here, it's part of the path of cessation. So everything I do is to cleanse it out, lift it to its highest potential. That's part of the completion cycles. That's how it works in the completion cycles. You go into all unfinished business. You make the right choices. You clear it out. You deconstruct it. It ceases to exist.
Make the right choices.
And yes, but the right choices is not about a continued life. The right choice is about ceasing to exist. It's very important to understand, because if you have the fear of quote unquote ceasing to exist,
Sure.
in all versions of yourself, and you're clinging onto the idea that when I leave here I go to another earth, or when I leave here I go to another place, then you are tailored by that expectation of going to another place, whatever that is. And if there is a fear of whatever that other place is, there's a lot of defense mechanism. Then there's a lot of not real choices. There's a lot of choices that are not really choices, because they're all based upon self-preservation and fear of ceasing to exist.
Sure, absolutely.
So in that manner, when we talk about energy work, when we talk about the teachings that I provide, if people need to understand that foundation, because if they think that I am teaching for preservation of the human soul and who and what we have become inside the enclosure, then they're misunderstanding what I'm talking about. Because looking at what we have become, just look at the world. Do you think that's something that's worth circulating out there?
This is a real good, and a lot of our stress and suffering, from what I understand in my own, is craving. Craving, grasping, and then clinging. So craving, most people associate that with sense pleasures, right? I'm craving for this. I have to have this chocolate, or I crave to get this the heck out of here. I don't want this. It would just be better if I crave to just think. So, but on the more subtle levels, what you're talking about is what they're craving for existence, to be and become something. Craving for being, yes, that's the one that's a little bit more obvious. But it is subtle, because that's more of a subtle craving. But then we have the opposite of that. There is also a craving of non-being, non-becoming, and so that is also can be a source for stress if we cling to having to have that. And so the alternative I have when I have enough awareness and consciousness to see that is neither crave towards being and becoming, nor crave for non-being and non-becoming, right? Because I see if you push these even to the extremes, on one extreme you get eternalism, where that in a way that's to me that could be a trap too, because what if I want to get out of that? Too bad, it goes on forever, can't get out of that. And then on the other end, complete annihilationism, which then both of these extremes, I feel, then there's no incentive to make right choices and to do things ethically. See the benefit in neither craving for being and becoming, or craving or non-being.
I would like to teach here, as I was taught, as part of that. It's not a monastery, it's a little community of a specific group of selected people that showed the signs of already had previous existences with doing the Bodhisattva path. So that's the first step. So the teachings was from my mentor. What he taught me, my mentor there, because it was not a teacher, but I'm here going to use it as teaching. He had some profound ways of exemplifying things. It was not as if I asked a question, then there would be this long, elaborate teaching or whatever, as it is within the sutras and whatnot. Never ever. It would always be these, more like Zen, as in kind of short, spot on, but still very, very, or like the parables in the Gospels, where you really get the insight in it that is clear and is not to be misunderstood. Because when a mentor or teacher and on that class teaches you, you don't question, you don't ask questions, you listen, you pose the original question, and then you just listen. And then you go up in a high state of energy, and then you get it. And there's not a second chance, you get it spot on. And that's the group of people that was selected there. You get it right away. This is not up for discussion. This is not up for studies. This is not about. If you take your time and you bother your teacher, you listen and you don't bother again. So that's just how it goes. So I was this kind of, the question is that when we have people who have this fear of non-existence and they crave a continuous life cycle, they are not ready to let it go. They still feel they have so much they need to live out. They still feel this world offers so much to them. They still feel that certain things are super important to them, which of course they're not, but it's based upon some kind of not readiness to let go. And that's recognized. There are not all people who are ready to let go of everything and lead to the big unknown of non-beingness and non-perception and non-known. So what he would say is that people who are not ready to let go, of course it was a different language, different time, I'm paraphrasing, but the summation of what he said was, people who are not ready to let go, they, in their practice, in their everyday practice, and everything they do, both in meditation and in outside of meditation, both in contemplation and outside of contemplation, is to aim for the Bodhisattva path. To, if they're not ready to let go of this life, then they should aim for a next life in compassion and in kindness and in living as a person that, due to the still attachment to the world as it is, then be reborn into a life where they are giving more to the world than they are taking from the world. And with that, then there could be a reason why they should continue their path within the reincarnation, because they're giving more than they are taking. And those who came to us and had this, but I'm clinging, I'm not saying cling, this is modern terminology. The word in more layman's term would be, I'm not ready to let go. I'm not ready to not be reborn. That it's too frightening, it's too big, it's too overwhelming. I can't see how I can do that. How can I live with letting everything go? Then the answer would be, then live your life so that the rebirth you will have will be in kindness, will be in a situation where you help others, where you teach others, where you give others what they need.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because that's what I was wanting to get to when we talked about making choices and what's so important, because most people aren't to the level where they're going. And so they will, for who knows how long, consider being reborn. And so that's why the choices are so important, because they do matter. They do accumulate. They do add up. And so, if they think, speak, and act skillfully, intentionally, that's going to have skillful outcomes, more or less, either in this life or down the road. So now's your chance to do that, because maybe you can't let go, or even if you can we all know some things in our life, we're trying to let go of something, but we just can't, right? So that's an interesting thing, right? So the point is that, yes, that's goal number one, priority number one. And I think it's let go. But we should let go, What am I clinging to? And I won't go into this here, but one of the most profound experiences I've ever had goes to this very fact that I thought maybe I was letting go. I was clinging to life, right? And basically, I won't go into it. It was such a huge... So that's right. So our choices, they make a huge difference. And for those of us who aren't ripe and ready to fruit the thing that Randy's talking about, to service to all beings. That's
yes. And the little farmer where the community I came from were poor. It's part of Tibet. It was not. We were in the 1950s, perhaps a little bit earlier, because I was not particularly old at that time. So perhaps in the 1930s or whatever. Point being is that we are talking, and including that in the sutras, we're talking about people who are the lowest level of society, whatever that is, and their language skills are very simple and primitive. And people who study Theravada today, they have all sorts of very, very fancy words, which I kind of, sorry, you can hear I'm a little bit rejecting.
Choices are not too, I'm sorry, but choices aren't fancy.
No, but it's not really a choice. And you're not letting go in that manner. So how, when we are in that path of liberation, and again, the subsidiary timeline, a more modern version of it, is part of the course material, just putting it in there in the whole academy. But when we are in our everyday life, in a simplistic living where we are not doing some big, grand philosophical studies, but living, trotting along in our everyday life. That's what, the terminology that we there use, we're not thinking about, this is a defilement. Sorry about that. But we're kind of thinking, this is, I don't like that. This doesn't feel right. This is not really doing, I feel shame, or whatever the emotions are. I do a little bit psychological translation here instead. Yeah. But I want to go back into the path of liberation and when we get there and what that means, because these teachings are showing the remnants of the original teachings, which again, I can't say I know them, but I can say what I have been taught. So I'm revealing here what I have been taught, with that the ones who are not ready to, and let me complete that please, why they're not ready to let go, as in kind of going into the complete deconstruction where they work their way out of this system. They are kind of, if we imaginatively see that they are standing there in front of the gate, the golden gate, and are ready to step in, but they feel the pull of the world, the noise of the world, the excitement of the world, the being informed, form, the desires, the energies, everything that goes there that feels pleasant, unpleasant, or whatever it is, to use that terminology, something that excites us, something that makes us feel uncomfortable. And that pull is still there. There is more fear than there is release. There's more fear than there is relief. Release and relief. So the person is simply not ready yet to turn his or her back on the world, so to speak, go from the main timeline and into the path of liberation. We have that in also esoteric teaching systems. You go from the big broad path. Hindu have it Mahayana. You go into the small path. You have Christianity. You go through the eye of the needle, etc., etc. So that's what this path of liberation is. You leave the world behind. You're still in it, but you're not part of it. It's been said in many different teachings.
Sure.
What does it mean to be on the subsidiary more than what it means to be on the main road? Because there are so many voices out there that are explaining that brilliantly. Yeah. So we are standing there and we're seeing that gate of light, and we are getting ready to move there. And it is fearful, and it does feel intimidating. And we know we leave things behind. It's a kind of a little death. It's a kind of a chosen little death to go on the subsidiary timeline, because we know we will literally turn the back on the world as it is and how it presents itself, and we will now go into a path where things will be different. And that's where this understanding of the first part of the teachings, that aside from the other exercises I've done, that is part of the subsidiary timeline course material, is where I am right now, is the quest and the understanding of awareness, Tailors, reality. What does that mean on the subsidiary timeline? What does that mean on the path of cessation, where you begin to deconstruct? And I've already given the answer to those who are not ready. They can live their life in the understanding of constantly making choices and solutions that builds more harmony, that builds more coherence, that builds bridges, that creates an environment where most people can grow, where the daily incentive is to grow yourself, and in your own growth, others will grow too. Set an example. Be the highest version of a human you can be. There are so many teachings that teaches that. And it's the choices both in the situation to resolve to the highest possible outcome of the situation, whatever that is. It's not always just for good. Sometimes something needs to crash and burn, and that's actually the highest outcome. Exactly. So that's something you can grow. But it's also to be aware that the other part of the choice is that long-lived understanding that, yes, I'm not ready yet to let go of this world, as in I still feel this world calls for me. So I resolve to be in this world from the greatest possible level of understanding and inclusivity and coherence, so that because I am not ready to continue whatever that world offers to me, then in the time I am here, I will make sure I create as little distortion as possible. I will create as little entanglement as possible. I will harm as little as possible. I will make my footprint as light as possible. I will literally walk on fire or on air, as it's also been associated, that you are literally levitating through this realm, but you're still shining your light on everyone who comes in contact with you. That's the path of the Bodhisattva, not the old Thera inclusion that she will sit and hold the gate open for the others so they can follow. Because in the teachings as I know them, you are by your example showing what you can and cannot do, and can become and cannot become by these teachings. And then it's up to people to choose if they want to follow the same path, or they will follow another path that resonates more with them. So it's not about listening to a teacher or sitting at the foot of a master. It's about the understanding, and that's an esoteric saying. Actually, you're sitting on the foot of the master is your own soul. It's your own higher awareness, whatever that is, that you are to sit at the foot at. So you're the student, that's the human form. The master is all of the possibilities you have to become as this more elevated or more advanced type of being. That's the true master, not another human being, not a teacher, not a guru, not any of this. And all esoteric teaching, including out there, even in Christianity, even in Buddhism, whatever you come, they say, it's not about me. Don't worship me. It's about the teachings and how well you work with these teachings so that you can become a lamp within yourself, so you can become the force that drives you to what you need to explore, what you need to understand to continue your journey of wherever you want to go.
Which is kind of a paradox in itself, because here we're just talking about letting go and becoming, but if we are going to be and become, well, then we need to be and become the best.
Yeah, so that's the Buddhist. That's where you can't let go.
Yes,
that's why you're not ready to
yeah,
let go.
Yeah.
Because again, when we talk, this is Theravada terminology. But for me, when I talk about being on the path of cessation, it's not, I don't think in my head intellectually, it's about non-becoming. This is just terminology that cloaks the deep core understanding of what it is. Because when we go into these different teachings, when we step through that gate of golden light and we go to the other side, the first thing that gets chipped away is words.
True.
It's no longer explanations and long, elaborate conversations in our brain about this or that or whatever. Those of us who go through that gate, first and foremost, our brain is only igniting when we ask it to, and most of the time it's silent. It does not produce thoughts. It does not go into all sorts of explanations. It does not seek all sorts of explanations. The mind is no longer craving the touch of reality by producing all sorts of ideas and questions and what is this and that and whatever, that are just for the dopamine kick. The brain does no longer do that.
Non-clinging, so yeah.
No, the brain is just silent.
Well, I understand.
The brain is silent. It has learned its rightful place as a tool to engage with reality when needed, and when not needed, stay silent, like with the teacher. So that's where you have the full capacity understanding of how the brain actually should work. As in, most of the time, be silent, switch it on when it's needed, and then adapt it and work with it to explore the different realities for what they truly are, and not through all of the deceptions. And that's why the brain has this idea that I am this and I am that and I am so important and I can this and I, me and myself,
sure.
and I.
And
that's the brain. The brain has that standpoint.
And then what you mentioned there, so like, can then be love too at some point. So it's a constant
once the
letting
brain
go
understands,
and non-clinging, right?
Yes, once the brain understands that it's not the top of the mountain, the king of the mountain, that it actually is a part of an entire system where it has this very defined role, that when it's needed, then it kicks in, and when it's not needed, it goes silent to preserve the energy of the system. Then the heart can begin to talk as well. So there I'm using a different terminology here. And that's the first part, as I understand. Another is the understanding of the mind gets silent, where the ego structure as we know of it is associated with. That needs to be a clear field of processing energy that transform information into understandable concepts and impressions that is understood right away, like my teacher. And that's why he was that way, or my mentor. He exhibited for me, this is how the perfect mind works. You ask a question, you get the answer, you understand it right away, you get it as an image, you get it as a package of information, and you understand it right away with your intuition, not linear thinking, not questioning it, not deciphering it, not deconstructing it, not dismantling it to understand all its little pieces, as taking an animal and tear it to pieces and then sit with nothing left, and you've got all these little pieces, no longer an animal, and you forgot what it actually was. That's what the brain likes to do. And that's not wholesome, to use that expression. That's not unifying. That's not coherence. Coherence is to see the living life form as it is, exactly as it is, and what it tells you it is through intuition and information. And that's energetic. So the physical reality can never give you the answers, because the physical reality is scattered items of lost energy, to put it that way. It is decoherent. It's no longer giving off accurate information. It is distorted. It is out of whack.
This is why right view is how we're seeing the world is so very important. One of their biggest enemies if we're not viewing reality. And then this is perception. Everything Randi spoke to here is the importance of training perception too, because perception can be trained. Right.
The whole point is that when we move through the steps of silencing the mind, which we do in contemplation meditation, is the state of what is called anatta, the no self, is that the brain, in my interpretation, is that the brain no longer touches the world to create self-identification with the world. It goes into that stage or state where the mind observes the world as a fluctuation of energy and experiences, and everything just flushes through it. The mind field itself, because the field around the brain, is just part of that reality that can momentarily focus and step into reality and connect with the reality, and by that become a self that experiences reality. But it can also just as well deconstruct it right away, evaporate it right away, and just be this observing of all of these fluctuations of energies that passes in and just forms in different configurations, because that's the nature of reality. That's what they want to do. They want to have this momentarily, I experience existence, but then it disformate, because that's the four elements. They can't be gathered together because they need awareness to be gathered together. And that's why we go into the understanding of the saying, is that reality formates around awareness. So if you have an awareness that says cling on, then the energies of the world will formate into that concept. Whether it's true or not, it will formate into that concept. So your perception, your awareness of your perception, your awareness of being in contact with reality, your thought form, the way that you process information, the way you choose to process information in that moment, tailors the world around you. So the way you go around this is that you retract the self, you retract that connection point, that thing that wants to formate things into something I can experience. You step out of that, you just see this is what it is, but you know you're doing it. You know you can step in and out. You can, by will, say, now I choose to see that as an apple. You can step out. Now it's just energy. It's just part of this reality. I'm no longer touching it with my mind and my perception. I'm no longer forcing it into existence. And that's part of the quote-unquote karma teachings, the entanglement that not many are talking about as far as I know, because that's the real mastering of the awareness that in this level we have, it's a spectrum, but awareness is where things come to beingness, where they come into formation. The moment you look at it and you choose, now you exist, now we put it into formation.
Well, contact, that's the, whenever the senses contact an object, then there's that consciousness.
When the mind
contact. Yeah, exactly, yeah. But the things that you mentioned that are really important that stick out is identification, you mentioned. And so the walkaway wisdom for me is what we identify with is very important.
So where I want to go here today is that step one, those who are not ready to go through the gate to the subsidiary timelines, that leads out of this enclosure because they don't feel they're done with the world yet. For me, the answer is simple, and that's part of the whole academy, everything I do, even though sometimes I slide into the extraterrestrials and whatever, but part of the original old teachings as I recall them. Important to understand, because I'm not saying, oh, I got the truth here. Nobody does. We all have our own relative reality and version of it that we have experienced. Those of us who have traversed throughout so many lifetimes remember who and what we are in all of these lifetimes. So this is my version of it. That is that if people, my advice to people is if fear is higher than the understanding of why they need to let go, as in if they want to leave because it's painful and it's part of they want to escape, then they're not ready. Because see, they have not confronted their fear of this world. So they are clinging to a fear of this world. Their contact point is fear. So they're still entangled in this world, not through craving of still want to be, but because they're entangled by fear. And that's like the spider in the trap, or the fly in the spider's trap.
Fear existence.
So whatever, or just fear of this world, or this life has been hard, or whatever it is, they're not ready to acknowledge the fear. Acknowledge the unpleasantness of this world. So people who are in this, that they are what we could call on the more normal human, I still need to experience all of the gifts of this world, let's put it that way. I still don't feel I have completed my career. I still need to contribute to this world. I still need to bring offspring to this world, or whatever it is that they feel that they still need to contribute to this world because they're not done with this world. Then it should be within the framework of the Bodhisattva, as in Everything I do should come from a level of true understanding of what is needed here, what is the appropriate type of energy, how do we create as little distortion, as little harm, etc., etc. The best version of you can be, so that whenever you go into your next life, it's not about then I'll get a better life. No, sometimes people are actually going that path, their next life is 10 times worse. Exactly. But they are still learning how to make as little contribution to the world, as little distortion, not creating more dukkha, but diminishing the amount of dukkha, or the unwhackness, as I like to call it. Then there are the ones where we kind of saying, well, if we go with the fear, then that's another approach. The ones that are in fear of leaving this world because the big unknown is too big unknown and there is too much, whatever that is often associated with trauma. It is associated with hardship. It is associated with the understanding of the world as a really, really horrible place. You see, these are two different oppositions. One is that, oh, it's got all these opportunities. The other one, this world is the horrible place of all places to be. And that approach, interestingly enough, is also loving kindness. Because that's more towards yourself. The other one's oriented to otherness, the suchness. Here you go in the compassion to the isness, as you as part of the isness, as all of these fluctuating energies, and everything is good and fine. Everything is as it's supposed to be.
And feel that.
Everything is right. Even though it's not, this is how to conquer fear, that you go into the fear and you go into that very, very, I hope you can feel this energy because it's emanating from me when I'm saying it. You go into that space where your heart literally shines the golden, that becomes the gate itself, from where you can to transform fear into whatever is here right now, I can deal with it. I know how to deal with it. And I know how to deal with it because I know what compassion is. I know how to work with the kindness that I give to myself. Long as I radiate that, then the monsters that are there will either dissolve, because half of the monsters we have are something we create ourselves. But I want to say this is an energy blast that works on the astral plane, because fear is associated with the astral plane, with the distortion, with the little critters and energetic entities that are on the astral plane. It does not work when you're in front of a Draco. Just put that in context here. There are differences with these dynamics. And then there is the path of liberation, the subsidiary timeline, where, as again, there are other techniques that apply there. Because we're getting to the point where I want to end this, but there's so much more to say, because we have touched ground with how awareness tailors reality. But it depends on what path you're on. It depends on within what system you're working. It depends on where you are in your span of life, as in kind of the journey that you're on. Are you still not done with the world? Are you afraid of this world? Or are you ready to let go of this world? And there are probably a lot of other levels that you still have.
There's a lot of ones that I don't know, Randi. I don't know which one I'm on or where I want. You know?
Yes, and that's where people need to go into contemplation, meditation. If there is this huge doubt, then it's more meditation, it's more contemplation. It's more finding the answers. Contemplation is you start in meditation with a question and then you let it arise from reality itself. You learn, that's what people call intuition. You learn to be in coherence with reality, because reality is a huge school. Let's use that expression. It has, every single unit has information in it. The cup has information. What the talk we're doing here has information. The tree has information. Everything has information built in. That ties us back into the play, and we got pretty far off there. But it's okay, we can do that later on, because that's just the more advanced level of it. That's where we're going to the fourth dimension, where that's part of the learning to literally silence the brain, so that it can observe reality as it truly is. And at some point it will expand naturally as we grow in higher in energy and has less distortion and is less tied to our emotional experiences, are less eager to create thought forms and ask questions and all this noise and chatter and whatever's going on. We begin to observe reality as it actually is, and eventually we will penetrate the different layers of reality, the different multidimensional aspects of reality, and begin to learn that when we look at a tree, I can can look at it from 12 different angles, where each and one of them gives me information that I am willingly receiving, and I have no ego, I have no brain that wants to understand this or come up with ideas or what it is or ask questions. I am just perceiving.
You just see it. Yeah.
I just see it. It just flows to me from itself, because there is a kindness between who and what I am, and for instance, nature or tree or whatever. When it comes to some of the extraterrestrial groups, that's again a different modality and a different way of approaching it. So I'm talking about these teachings that goes with specifically with kindness and compassion is part of the path out of the enclosure. And that cannot be stressed enough. There's not one teaching system out there that's not preaching that.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the core essence of all teachings, to get out of the enclosure. What I want to say here is the last piece of this little podcast. It's not so little. Just because I pointed this out doesn't mean that it encompasses everything. It doesn't mean I have all of it. Now everything you need to know is now
total, complete, ultimate.
Not at all. This is just one snippet of 3 words that were put together. And that's part of multidimensional and higher awareness. The ability to understand that whenever you begin to investigate a topic or 3 words or concepts or constructs or whatever it is that are on the path of liberation, and that's the path of cessation. As we touch the world touches us. As we focus on something, it focuses on us. So if we're saying, but there is this complete, deep, sensed, experienced, it's time. There's no choice. It's. I'm sorry, people. I can use a better analogy. When you're hungry, there is no question. There's no will. There's no I'm hungry. It's just you're hungry and you eat. It's just natural. It's there. It's how it is. You can't discuss it. It's not chosen. You don't choose to be hungry. It's just there, and you follow it. You know what to do. It's right there in your face. And that is when you're on the path of cessation. It's clear. It's not for debate. It's not something you choose. It's not something you can change yourself into. It's there. And with that, there also comes different levels of the teachings. And one of these levels is that reminded me of awareness, Tailors, reality. So the takeaway of that section was that, as I talked about, the anatta. That when you are looking at things, remember what you look at, you touch. And when you touch it, it formates. And when it formates, you bring it to life. And when you bring it to life, you get entangled in this world. So even though I'm saying, well, when I look at an apple, then the practice would be, can I look at the apple without putting it into becoming an apple? Can I stop it from becoming by my awareness? Can I stop it from actually existing and constantly to see it as energy? Can I take the apple and put it in my smoothie and still just see it as energy? Can I see everything as energy fluctuations? And in that understanding, as part of the path of liberation, as energy understanding, can I then just interact with it without interacting with it, without forcing it to take form? Can I be the observer of whatever it is in its own right, without forcing it to be something specific? I don't know. These are questions for the practice. And that's why it came into my head, because it needed me to point to the understanding that on the path of liberation, whatever we work with, aside from the path of the Bodhisattva to create little distortion, as little harm, as I do with the ḥprj, I transform energy so it goes into a higher state, so it leads for those who want to continue. There is a higher state of energy, higher state of knowledge. So that's my contribution, where I do my donation to the world, to put it that way. But then there's my personal path, where even though I do that, I'm also doing it in a way that I don't get entangled with it. So I'm creating thought forms without creating formations. That's up to people. So there is this very, very elaborate awareness, consciousness, interaction in a world when you're no longer in it. And that's on the path of liberation. And that's why I got this morning, that awareness tailors reality. So if you don't want to create forms, if you don't want to tailor a suit in the world, then you need to know how to address the world without creating formations. And that's definitely a practice of mindfulness and mindfulness practice that is on a what we call a little bit more elaborate scale than just being aware in the now and make correct choices, so to speak, to create less little harm and always so forth.
I think that some of it's karma that leads to are actions that don't create fruit, right? So it's possible, as it said, once you awaken, to actually think, speak, and do things that don't have an outcome either way, good, bad, negative, positive, whatever.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be possible fully awakened.
Yeah. And just to put that into, I know that was the resolve I made. I could see I'm now, because what I was working with in that little community was actually the reincarnation and how that happens and what the laws are and whatnot. So I saw in that moment that now I'm being dragged back in because there are so many formations now. I cannot evade it. It's there. It's in my field. It's part of me. Then okay, I go in and take this life, and it's been a long process for me to reconcile with that choice and the sadness and the sorrow, and I was supposed to move on, and the anger and what happened to me and all these things. But now I can see, okay, if I did make that choice, that resolve, then I also get that strength that comes with it in my heart that says, okay, now since the laws are pushing me there, then how do I make the most of it? What is it that I then can learn? How far can I extend the path of cessation? And that's where I'm beginning to recognize and remember now when I'm back on the path that I used to be on. Then I recognize, okay, now we got through all the trauma and all the stuff and got that cleared out of the main timeline and back in the one where I belong. Then that's kind of, okay, then it becomes an experiment. Then it becomes an experience of how to live in the world without getting drawn back into it. And I think that was the resolve. And when I get that, I get this very kind of, it's exciting. Then I have a craving of actually mastering to not have a craving, a mastering to not create formations, a mastering of not creating entanglement. Then I find that as a uplifting perspective of I can do this, and then suddenly it comes an eye and you see how that one, then before you know it you get drawn right back in. But that's some of the excitement that we can resolve to when we see we get drawn back into realities where, oh yeah, I can't avoid it because this is what I have become. But it's what can I then make the most of it before we enter into the body? We kind of make that quick snap assessment. Okay, I can see the entirety. This is what's going to happen. How do I make the most of it? And what is the key point here? And that's like a code that's in our field. That's like, we call it a mission statement or whatever we want to call it. It's the resolve of the soul. Okay, since I'm back in here, what do I need to do so I get out of here again?
Exactly. We don't have the ability to just fast forward and go right to the end. We have to go through the whole thing as it happens. So, right?
Yes. So that's in that context. This little saying I woke up with is to be understood. So that's a lot of insight, and there's a lot of contemplation, and that's a lot of how to exemplify. I don't know. We'll see. And with that, thank you for listening in, and until next time, take care.